This is the LatinNews Podcast. My name is Richard McCall. I am your host here in Bogota, Colombia. Our very special guest this week is in Paramaribo, Suriname. Journalist Ank Kuipers is going to talk to us about the upcoming elections in Suriname due to take place. And of course, this could lead to, oil changing wealth in the country. And so we need to talk about that. And of course, who the candidates are and what they're promising to the electorate. So thank you so much for coming on the LatinNews Podcast.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Now, this is an absolute pleasure because Suriname is a largely unknown quantity, up there on the shoulder of South America, but it's becoming, it's incredibly important at the moment. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about this upcoming election.
Well, the election is on May 25, and currently the parties are registering. We have about 400,000 voters, and there are between 15 and 17 parties and party combinations participating in these elections. And that's quite a lot for such a small amount of voters. And also they all have to pay about 15,000 US dollars. And only if they gain a seat, at least one seat, they will get the money back. Otherwise, they lose it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a significant expense.
Yes. And there were protests because it was even higher.
Mm.
And of course, upcoming small parties, it's a lot of money.
Yes.
Especially in a country where the income is very low.
Does the population, the voting population in Suriname vote along race lines?
They used to, but it's changing. It has changed and it is still changing. But there are still parties that are more attractive for certain ethnic groups.
Mm-hmm.
But also the population is more mixed now, so it's vanishing.
Has vanished. And I mean, so you say May 25th, we have these elections, 15 to 17 parties. Is there any likelihood of any one party winning outright? Because I imagine they're going to have to make agreements and deals across the board.
Yes. There will always be a coalition government, always. Because to elect the president, you need 2/3 of the seats in parliament. And it's very hard to get these seats as one party alone. They will never make that.
No.
If you can't elect the president in parliament, then we have this very huge meeting of like 800 regional representatives who then vote. But
Yes.
I think this time they will elect the president in parliament.
Oh, you think it's going to go through, and who are the main parties and candidates?
So we have the current government exists of the Progressive Reform Party of President Chan Santokhi. Mm-hmm. It was originally a very East Indian party, a party with people originating from India. He is governing together with ABOP, which is the party of Ronnie Brunswijk. He is the current vice president. His party was originally attractive mainly for the descendants of the African people who live in the interior. He also governed with the National Party of Suriname. That's the party that originally was the party of the descendants of Africans living in the coastal area. Yes. And he also was governing with Percaya Luhur. That's a party of people of Japanese descent. Yes. But they all try to show that they are a very multi-ethnic party, all of them. And during the last years, the NPS The National Party of Suriname got out of it. It quit. It left the government, and there are also tensions with the Japanese party. But the VHP, the party of the president, they gained 20 seats of the 51 in parliament during the elections of 2020. But that was also because a lot of people, a significant amount of people, left their traditional party because they wanted to vote out Desi Bouterse, the former president. So they left their party to vote Bouterse out, but it's widely expected that they will return to their former parties because they are not very happy with the current president.
Okay. And this
Very confused.
it's complex. This discontent with the president. Why is there this discontent?
Well, when this government arrived, they started 1 month earlier than they should have because the former government didn't have any money to pay the civil servants anymore. And they knew that they would take over, that's what they always say, that they would take over a very bad economic situation, but it was much worse than they had ever expected. So they started to work with IMF. There was no other choice. That's what also all economists say. The situation was really, really bad. And they started to reform the economy, but they forgot to do they should have protected the poor people first. And they had some sort of system in place along the way, but it doesn't work very well, which means that about 20,000 people received support from the state that shouldn't have received it, while other people who should have received it don't get it. And the people get per month, they get 1,800 Surinamese dollar. It's just to support them, and that's about $50.
$50 a month.
Yes, that's just to support them to be able to pay perhaps electricity, water, gas, cooking gas. Yeah.
Do we think that this has a great deal to do with corruption in Suriname?
I think partly corruption, because people who received it entitled to it, they of course, how else would they get it? And also because perhaps there was not the right staff at the Ministry of Social Affairs. I personally tried to get this support for a very poor person, and I spent about a whole day calling everyone in the Department of Social Affairs. And poor people, they don't have money to call. It's too expensive, so that's why they just don't receive it. So people are not aware about of the macroeconomic restructuring that went very well. I mean, there's a lot of compliments for Suriname that they did it really well and they restructured all the debts and stuff like that. But of course, if you don't have enough to eat or you can't pay the doctor, then it doesn't count.
So the incoming government was able to restructure the debt and get some favor from the IMF, but yet the economy is still in a very bad place.
It's still vulnerable, but they got the inflation down from 60% yearly to 10%. So that is quite an achievement.
Yes.
Yeah. But for the people, that doesn't count because they are angry. And they are also very open for brainwashing by Facebook and other social media. And I think a lot of people also have very bad memory.
Mm. Well, this is something that we see all over the continent, and if not over the world. But
Yeah.
when we talk about unemployment, there were those very big, serious protests in 2023. Is this what we're referring to as well? That the rage with the current politicians and the situation?
Well, the protests in 2023, February 17, they were against the economic situation and also against government policy. But actually, it was a very peaceful protest. When I was there, you see people selling ice cream, you see tourists making pictures of all the colorful people with umbrellas because there was so much sun. It was a calm day. It was a nice protest. But there were also people who came there with bags filled with fuel and stones, and it looked as if it was very orchestrated. And the authorities didn't really react in a proper way. They were not. We have a lot of intelligence services, but apparently they hadn't done their job because apparently it came like as a surprise. And then they also, this happened on the square where the palace is, but then the crowd went into the city, and then you had all this looting and stuff. But the majority of the people there, I think I might say perhaps 95%, they were not happy with the situation and they were protesting, but they would never initiate something like this. But of course, in such a small country or community, everybody was very, very shocked. It has indeed been a big shock for a lot of people.
So with this situation, which obviously when you say the inflation has improved, but it doesn't change much for the poor and the needy, with this situation and with elections in May, and very soon indeed, what are the candidates promising? What are they promising for the population? Everything.
Heaven. They promise heaven. But okay, the party of President Santokhi, he wants to get another term because he says, well, we've now had the hard part, so we can now start doing nice things. And actually, he already started a bit, which is populist, and it's not a good signal. Also, the delegation of IMF was, but in a way, I think it's true that the hardest part that that's behind us now, but still the government budget, we are still very short of money. Even the organizers of the elections now said, well, we need money to continue preparing everything, but we didn't receive that yet. Because first the budget has to be approved in parliament. But he really asked the people to not listen to the promises of other parties, because some parties, they are already standing there and want to perhaps start borrowing again. And we still have very many loans to pay back. They only restructured them, but there are still a lot of debts.
Yeah.
The party of Desi Bouterse, the former president, you know that, well, let me explain a little. Desi Bouterse, he plotted a coup in 1980. And when he was just a young soldier, a sergeant. In 1982, 15 opponents of his then military rule were killed by military. And he was, after over 40 years, he got the verdict. He had to go to jail for 20 years. And then he disappeared. That was in January 2024. Nowhere to be found. Lot of rumors. It's a small society. Everybody knew where he was. He was at home. They constructed a bunker. He was in Venezuela. He was in Cuba. He was in the interior. There are a lot of theories, and everybody knew where he was, but he was not found. And then one day before Christmas, he was delivered at his house in the city by a black bus, but he had passed away. So there was a big shock in society. He was, I think, the most charismatic leader Suriname has ever had. Also appealing to a lot of youngsters. And the man was, he was in his 70s. He was not in good shape. He smoked, he drank alcohol, but he had this charisma. He was a great singer on the stage. And for the youth, the murders of 1982 was ancient history. And also in the schools, people don't, there's not much information on the recent past of the country. So he passed away, and now his widow, he is now on the political stage.
Really?
Yes, and she's, you see how she's developing her skills. But the party also has a different chairwoman now. Actually, when he disappeared, they voted for another leader of the party, which was in June last year, I think. And there's also his vice president, who is quite young. He is 42. And apparently, those three persons might become presidential candidates. But they are not, they are still figuring it out in the party. There's also a lot of fighting because perhaps not fighting, but they are struggling to find one way with the whole party. And it's going to be very interesting. But none of them has the charisma Bouterse had. So they keep mentioning him, projecting big pictures and small quotes of him, all to show the people that actually he's still here. And he ordered them to win the elections.
So it seems to me that Bouterse he throws a long shadow over Suriname's politics, and whoever manages to receive, or convince the electorate that they are the anointed candidate of Bouterse has a very good chance of becoming president.
They need 2/3 in parliament. And so it might be, they might find partners to cooperate with, but perhaps these partners will say, well, we want to do the presidency. So it's not very predictable what will happen. So, also because our electoral system changed. And before we had 10 electoral districts. And the votes there were not all, did not have all the same weight. So now, for the first time, the whole country is one big electoral district, and all votes are evenly important. We have this very small district of Koroni, of which I happen to hear that you've been there.
Totnes.
Yes. And Koroni is the smallest district, but every elections you would see political parties speeding to go there and build their party center and talk with people and be friends. And Koroni is very important. In Koroni, there were only last elections about 1,600 voters, 1,600, and they were good for 2 seats in parliament, 2 of the 51 seats. So that was completely out of balance. They now changed it, so every voter has the same word, and 65% of all votes are being casted in either Paramaribo or the neighbor district of Wanica. So 65% will be voted of the voters are in the coastal area, in Paramaribo or next to it. And that's why a lot of parties now only concentrate on this area, because they know that if they have these two, if they get the votes of the people in these two districts, then they have the majority. Then they have 33 seats of 51, and they only need one seat more to elect the president.
So the concentration is on the coast. So the concentration. So we would say that they're not ignoring the interior, but the interior has very much taken a back seat.
Yes, before not. So the party of there's another comparison I could make. The party of the now Vice President Brunswijk, they got the party of Brunswijk, the now Vice President. He got not even 25,000 votes, which is 9% of all votes in 2020, but he got 8 seats. And then the National Party of Suriname, they got 32,000 votes, 11% of all votes, but they only got 3 seats. So it was very unproportionate.
Yeah, it's the issue of the electoral collage over one vote and singular votes. I'm seeing this, this common theme occurring, obviously in Suriname and obviously many other countries as well. But this lack of money and economic concerns. Are there other issues that people are very worried about? So we are living in an unstable, uncertain time at the present. Are there security issues in Suriname as well?
There are, but not as bad, I think, as in the neighboring countries.
Okay.
But people do not feel safe. What's very concerning for people is the healthcare, which really, I think last year about 300 nurses and doctors left the country. They work in Curacao, in the Dutch Antilles, or in Holland. Also well-trained nurses who used to work in surgery rooms or intensive care, they just leave the country for a better income. And also education is something people really find very important for their kids. And yeah, I think a teacher only earns perhaps between $2 and $250 a month. So life is hard for people.
But I mean, is there any way? I mean, we talk about. I mean, we get onto this now. Is the potential for all of that? The discovery of oil in Suriname and oil changing wealth, such as what has occurred in Guyana. This could turn Suriname around. This could go to the health, if of course it happens, healthcare, the economy, to education. What do we see happening in this situation? I suppose the political parties are promising, as you said, heaven. They're promising heaven, but they're looking obviously at oil wealth, potential oil wealth.
Yes. So all of the parties, I think, are looking at this oil wealth, and some of them really want to take an advance on that income. IMF has warned against that. Economists warn against that too. Also, we have still a lot of debts to pay, and part of the oil income will also go to the bondholders, which the former government borrowed a lot of money from against, I think, 12 or 13% interest. So actually, the coming years, there will not be much income. The first oil will be out in 2028. But of course, there will be influx of workers, equipment, there will be more employment, They try to school people now to be able to fill these job openings. But it will not, also in Guyana, well, what we hear is that the poor now have to leave the city because the rent is it's not possible to pay the rent. The houses become more expensive, so the wealth is not equally spread in Guyana. So that's one thing Suriname wants to learn from, or certain parties want to learn from that. The government is not allowed to overspend. But what we now see is that, well, last week when there was a press conference of the Minister of Finance and the IMF mission, then after that the minister had a meeting with Staatsolie, our national oil company, to see if he could get some funding for urgent things he had to pay. But they are not allowed to overspend the budget. And the IMF agreement cooperation ends in March. And so there might be a new agreement with the new government, depending on which government will be there. And also people say it would be better to keep IMF on board just to prevent the reserves from being robbed again. Because we now have reserves. We have, I think, reserves at the central bank for 8 months. But when this government came in, there were not even reserves for 1 month of import. And it's an importing country. And also the government just yesterday, they announced that they renewed the contract with the central bank governor, who was to retire in March, but he will stay on 1 year longer, according to the president, to guarantee economic stability. Because they are afraid a possible other government will put people there who might have different view on economic subjects.
Clientelism and corruption, I think we're getting at here, definitely.
And when they came into power, there was only, I think, not even sufficient for 1 month of import. Because they need at the central bank you need reserves.
So the solution that these political parties see is to take advances from the potential oil wealth and spend it. And this sounds very dangerous indeed. This sounds very, very worrying for an economy that's in such a bad state.
That's why I think economists and also pragmatic politicians say, well, let's renew our cooperation with IMF, because then at least we will have to keep the budgetary discipline. But the first 3 years, or perhaps even longer, this amazing wealth will not be there yet.
And this is the problem, is that everyone thinks it's an immediate boom for the country and for the population. We're winding this down now, Ank, but I need to sort of think, you're talking about so many political parties and so many promises, 15 to 17 political parties potentially, and people who haven't decided whether they're running. And the elections are in May. It's just round the corner. Do you have any possible prediction? Do you think the incumbent can remain in power, or it's going to go a different way in a different coalition?
Well, I think most of these parties will not get any seat. So there may perhaps be 6 or 7 or perhaps 8 parties combinations that will gain seats. There is a big chance that the current leading party of the current president will lose some seats, I think, but they will still be one of the bigger parties. And I think the party of Bouterse the National Democratic Party, they will be gaining seats. That we have a voter turnout of about 73-75% normally.
It's quite high.
Yes. And so I'm really looking forward to see how many people are now going to vote or not. The ballot, the form will be it will be 50 by 70 centimeters. And that's really kind of small. It's because they only will put one picture of each party on this thing. But there are now also parties who say, no, we need all photos, all pictures on the ballot. And of course, there's illiteracy. So people they don't know what they vote, who they vote for then.
And what about this contested area between Suriname and Guyana? What's going on there?
Yes, apparently the Guyanese are quite active there. They do have their army there, and they announced that I think they would build a school or something and an airstrip. Suriname keeps protesting, or at least they keep registering all the incidents. Because Guyana is an English-speaking country, most of the world uses their version of the map.
Mm-hmm.
Where Suriname is a Dutch-speaking country, and they keep showing this map. And there was 2 weeks ago, or a little bit shorter, there was a conference here of the Surinamese Guyanese Chamber of Commerce, and people were really enthusiastic. It was a really good vibe, and a lot of great things have been accomplished. But then somebody found out that one of the organizers handed a document with the Surinamese map. So now the Guyanese president or government has called the Surinamese ambassador for a formal complaint. And now the organizer, he apologized, much to a lot of people here think he should have never done that.
A negotiation takes both sides, and having a reasonably.
There's no negotiation. This is certainly Surinamese area.
Okay.
Yes.
And of course, there must be mineral wealth in that area.
Everywhere,
exactly. So there we go.
There's also one other subject that is now being discussed, because the government, they had a commission, and the commission had a memorandum of understanding with Shinalco. It's a Chinese alumina company, and they were promised that they can work in the west of Suriname and take the bauxite, put it on big ships, take it to China and process it there. And there's much protest against that, because people say, well, if we don't have the refinery here, we don't need that, because we will earn very little compared to what we could have earned. And they say, and of course that's, I think, a valid argument, we will have all this oil wealth, so why should we do this? Because compared to all the oil wealth, it's a small amount of income.
Certainly. With the oil exploration due to take place, and hopefully, let's say, start pumping oil in 2028, there have already been concessions to companies. There are already concessions to big companies making the deals.
For the oil?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I just today received a press release, which I now can find very easily. It's amazing. And so Total Energies, they will drill in deep sea.
Mm-hmm.
They made the final investment decision, And our oil company is now gathering the funding to participate for 20% in that. Then there is also this year, there will Shell and Qatar Energy will drill in another block, an exploration well. Also this year, there will be very close to the coast, so near shore, there will be drilling by Qatar Energy and a daughter company of Staatsolie. So all the coastal area has been. You can perhaps see it on the map. No, you can.
It's
Yeah.
been divided up already.
Yes, and there are still blocks available, but Staatsolie is doing that quite carefully and well planned. We have the regulator, which is still now part of Staatsolie in some way, but it's the national regulator. And what most experts say is that the contracts that Suriname has negotiated are much better than the contracts Guyana negotiated. But because Guyana hit the jackpot at the first hit, they are now gaining a lot more, but our contracts generally are being considered as much better than Guyana has with companies.
Well, that's a nice positive note to end on.
Yes, well, there are so many other positive things too in this country. We have a lot of forests, and we
Yes.
will also try there is a green development strategy. They want to earn also on the carbon credits, and we hope that they will protect the forest better. But it's a beautiful country. It's very interesting, very nice people
Yes.
of all parts of the world. So it's very diverse and really good food,
Yes.
as you know.
Yes, I know.
So we only hope that people can afford to buy that food and to plant, because it's a very fertile country. Yes.
Well, let me take this moment to say thank you so much, Ank Kuipers, for sharing your knowledge and obviously deep affection for Suriname, your home. We hope that this election in May, a very crucial election for Suriname, it seems, we hope it goes off peacefully and, of course, is the right direction for the country in the future regarding the oil wealth, regarding the economy for the local people, healthcare, and the other concerns that you have, of course, expressed. So it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here on the LatinNews Podcast.
Thank you. It was nice talking to you.
So thank you very much to Ank Kuipers there in Paramaribo, Suriname. I have been your host, Richard McCall, here in Bogota, Colombia. This has been the LatinNews Podcast, and we'll be back in a fortnight's time discussing further issues and topics from the region. Goodbye.